Hello, guys. Today we are going to be talking about Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Um, my story with this book is really interesting. It's very different from a lot of the other books that I hold in as high regard as I hold this one. The story is different. Um, I believe I bought this at my university's bookstore. I It took me a while to remember that. For a while this was just a book I owned, but I didn't really remember how I came into possession of it. But I think I remember walking through the bookstore just browsing for anything that interested me, and I saw this. I liked the printing, recognized Virginia Woolf's name, recognized the title briefly, and it was like $11, and I thought, this is something that I should probably read, and it's pretty cheap, so I picked it up, not really knowing when I was going to read it. And then it like kind of sat on my nightstand over here, and like would kind of call to me as I was reading other books, and then it just kind of climbed its way up the queue, and eventually I was like, all right, let's read it, let's give it a shot. It's kind of short, uh, deceivingly dense, I'll say, but I read it, and wow, it this is a really magical work of literature for me. I really enjoy this book a lot, and I really hope I can convey some of that enjoyment to you today. So, Mrs. Dalloway is a novel by Virginia Woolf. It was published in 1925, and it is one of the most foundational works of modernism and stream of consciousness, in my opinion. Um, it's a story very kind of similar to Ulysses. This takes place over just the course of one day, and we follow multiple different characters. Of course, we follow Mrs. Dalloway, but we follow many other people who are close in her life or not so close in her life. You follow multiple different people throughout London on this day, and you're inside their mind, and you hear their thoughts, their actions, and it's just a really powerful testament to the human experience and to the human thought, in my opinion. When I was reading this, I was really thinking about both Woolf's writing style and this book in comparison to James Joyce and Ulysses, because they were both. I take it most of Woolf's writing is like this is actually the only Woolf that I've read, but obviously in Ulysses, Joyce was very focused on stream of consciousness, and they both do it very well. But the way I like to think about it is Joyce is very abrasive with his stream of consciousness. He doesn't really care that you're reading a novel. He wants to just depict it as accurately as it sounds in head. But Virginia Woolf is aware that you are reading a novel. And because she's aware of this, because she's aware of the fact that she's giving this to you in the form of a novel, she's able to weave it into prose that is just so beautiful and so relatable. It just kind of blows everything you've ever read out of the water. It's just very, very wonderful. Now, with that being said, the fact that this is stream of consciousness, it is a pretty dense text. It is kind of difficult to read at times. It's definitely difficult to get a sense of at the start. Around like 30 pages in, you start to pick up how she's going to write, and you're at like the last 100 pages of the book are a little bit easier, but I guess last 200 pages. But up until that point, it can be a little bit stop and go, a bit jarring. But it does level out, and when it does level out, it's very good. I guess to go over the story a little bit, it's a very faint story. The story is almost peripheral. It follows two main characters. Obviously, we have Clarissa Dalloway, who is going to be throwing a party tonight, and will be inviting a bunch of other high-class people from London. She's very excited. She loves her parties. And so it's the process of her getting ready for this party and such. And then we also follow this gentleman and his wife in a park, Septimus Warren Smith. And he is a veteran in World War One, and he is undergoing a really bad episode of shell shock today. And yeah, it's a very powerful contrast seeing a completely shell-shocked veteran in the park contrasted with high on life Mrs. Dalloway, Clarissa Dalloway, who is so excited to be throwing a party. It's just two completely different spectrums of the world that overlap in some areas, and they overlap in a really neat way. And then the story also follows, like I mentioned, other peripheral characters who Septimus knows or Mrs. Dalloway knows, but there's no chapters in this book, and the way we keep switching perspective is very interaction based, and it's just so wonderfully done. There will be somebody who comes and visits Mrs. Dalloway, and then we'll follow them as they leave. They'll bump into somebody else, and we'll follow that person they bumped into, be in their mind. And it's just like, it's almost like a torch that's passed around to everybody in this city in London until you eventually end up back with Clarissa Dalloway at her party. And it's just a wonderful way to tell the story, wonderful way to just bounce from mind to mind and to understand the inner workings of every single one of these characters, because everyone is very distinct in this novel. All, like, how many characters are there? There's something like 8. They are all very distinct and approach life with their own philosophies, their own ideas, and their own attitudes, and it's just very, very cool to see how well Virginia Woolf understood those personality types and those personal philosophies. It's just extremely well done. So that's about it for spoiler-free story. There's not a whole lot of story. It's mostly just day-to-day life. This is very slice of lifey, but it's done in a way that's just like, it's not boring. It's very insightful and very touching to watch. A way I like to describe this book to a lot of people is it feels like she is Virginia Woolf. It feels like she is plucking memories and thoughts out of your mind that you didn't even know you had thought before. That she will describe a character thinking about somebody else a certain way, and you'll read it and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I've literally thought about people that way before. That's insane. But it's not something that sits in the forefront of your mind until Virginia Woolf pulls it out. And it's really cool I think it's really cool when authors are able to do that. It's always very impressive for me. And Virginia Woolf does that throughout the entire length of the novel. I remember the first 15 pages of this, I was getting kind of worried because it was incredibly profound from very early on, and I was kind of scared. I was like, okay, Wolf, you can't be pulling your punches like this that early. You can't be throwing haymakers like this on page 15. You can't be doing that. You've got to make me work for it. You've got to wait. But then I realized, no, that's the entire book is like this. She's not gushing all of her biggest points in the first, 20 pages. The entire book is filled with revelations and moments and thoughts that are just as impactful as these. It's just every page is so incredibly dense and laden with the human experience and human emotion. It's just a wonderful, wonderful text. And it's probably the text that I'm most excited to reread in my life. Reading this book, I already knew that I was going to reread it probably like half a dozen times at least over the course of my life. Just because I knew I was missing stuff as I was reading it, and I was okay with missing it because I couldn't wait to go back at another point in my life, maybe in a year, 2 years, and read through and this be a completely different book for me. Take away something completely different from this book, or take away the same thing but amplified and maybe peppered with some other things that I didn't quite pick up on. This feels like a book that you can always return to, and that it will always shock you and always be just as impactful. And I think that's really special when a book can make you feel like that. So yeah, that's about as spoiler-free as I can get it. So now I guess let's talk about the meat of the book. Some of the specific things that Virginia Woolf touches on in here that I really enjoyed. I touched on this briefly earlier, but I really love the way that these perspectives are transferred and interacted with other perspectives. There's just a constant stream of foils on foils on foils. It's like an Ouroboros. Everybody is a foil to everybody else, and it's just so well done. Like Clarissa and Peter, and then Peter and Richard and like Sally Seton, like Elizabeth and Clarissa, Elizabeth and Miss Kilman and Clarissa, Septimus and Clarissa, Septimus and Mr. Bradshaw, and then Mr. Bradshaw and Clarissa. She knows him. Like, it's the way everybody is connected is so I love to see how everybody kind of contrasts and interacts with everyone in a different way. Some people positive, some people negative. It's so it's just so well done. It's truly is a dense web. Everybody's connected in different ways. It's super, super cool. And what I also really like about a web like that is it feels like all of these characters can make up one person. Like, they all make up an element of the reader, it feels like. Everybody in this book kind of embodies a different part of the human experience: the excitement, the sorrow, the anger, the frustration, the ego. Like everybody embodies just a little bit of everything. We have so many distinct characters here. Peter, like childish Peter Walsh, free Sally Seton, like high on life Clarissa. I think I already used that to describe her, but just I guess lush. That might be a good one. Lush Clarissa. I guess held in check Richard. I don't really know how to describe Richard. He's just kind of a dude. And then just everybody in this book kind of, rebellious Elizabeth, angry Miss Kilman. Everybody in this book kind of embodies a different part of the human experience. And when we bounce from perspective to perspective, each person resonates a little bit with us. We feel a little bit of everybody in everybody. I think one of the most impactful examples of this is the relationship between Clarissa and Mrs. Kilman, because Mrs. Kilman absolutely abhors Clarissa because of her privilege and her wealth, her beauty, and her ability to throw these parties. And the way this hatred is shown is so well done, because it comes immediately after a passage where Clarissa is talking about just how much she loves life. She's so jovial about it. She's so excited for her party. And then you're resonating with that, because you as the reader, while you resonate with this love for life, you have likely felt that at some point, where you are just very excited for a particular event, a particular week, particular day, and everything just feels like it's going right. You're so full of happiness and brightness. You're very happy, and you really resonate with Clarissa in this moment. And then you switch perspectives to Mrs. Kilman, and Mrs. Kilman almost rips you down from the heavens and is like, how lucky you are to have the privilege to feel like that, because some people like me don't. I was not born into wealth. I was not born pretty. I've gone through countless struggles, and I've overcome all of my struggles just to serve someone like you. I'm still just your servant, your housewoman, your maid. I forget her exact title, but she's something adjacent to that. And it just really, it kind of like, it inflates you, and you feel so full and happy with life, and you're like, yes, this is what living is about. And then Mrs. Kilman comes in and can deflate you and really humble you and remind yourself both. It gives you both empathy and humility. You're able to be happy that you have something to be so happy about, while also having empathy for those who aren't as lucky, aren't as fortunate to feel the way that you do. You feel very thankful for your position, while also feeling incredibly empathetic towards people who aren't in your position. Because with as much, of course you're supposed to resonate with Clarissa, but just because Mrs. Kilman hates Clarissa as much as she do, I at least me, I never found myself hating Miss Kilman. I just always felt really bad for her. I really resonated with her. I don't know if resonate's the right word, but I felt really empathetic towards her character. I didn't hate her for hating Clarissa. I felt sad for her. I felt bad for Mrs. Kilman, because there is a universe where you can live life to the fullness of Clarissa, and poor Mrs. Kilman didn't get that opportunity. Just the cards were not dealt to her right, and that's the only hand you're ever going to be dealt. And so you never really hate Mrs. Kilman. You just feel bad for her. And I think Mrs. Kilman represents a little part of all of us, that frustration, that the grass is always greener. There's always somebody who has something that you don't have, that you wish you could look like, you wish you could be like, you wish you could act like, talk like, do like. And Mrs. Kilman represents that part of yourself. And you feel almost affectionate towards that, because you recognize that. You see her hatred, and like, it's like a bitter hatred that you don't always want to recognize in yourself, and being able to see it in a character like that little bit of you encompassing the entire character, you relate to it, and it makes you reflect and think about yourself, and you're able to being able to empathize and want to hug a character like Mrs. Kilman is almost healing in a way, because it makes you want to hug a bit of yourself. It wants to tell yourself that it's okay, that you can release that sort of hatred. And I just think that's one of the most impactful examples for me. I just think that was a really well done part of this work, and there are many other characters that embody many other emotions similar to that and have the same effect of touching a certain part of your soul that I probably won't go into in this video, that I would just encourage you to read and discover for yourself. But that was one that's really impactful to me, and just an example of why this character writing is so impactful to me and why I think it's so incredible. And I suppose pivoting from character development, I want to talk a little bit more about her prose now. And this book has some of the greatest imagery I've ever seen in my life. It is genuinely so good. And to show you, the easiest way for me to show you that is I just want to read a part of this book out loud. It's a section of imagery that I think, this is probably my favorite bit of imagery in the whole book, if I'm being honest. And I just love the way that this was done, the way she weaves the metaphorical in with the reality and merges the two and puts you into a metaphorical space and then brings you back to reality. I just think it's wonderfully done. So this is a part where one of Clarissa's past relationships, Peter Walsh, has come to visit her and let her know that he is getting married to a woman in India. He's come to visit her and they're alone in the room, and it's bringing back a lot of feelings for the both of them. And Peter Walsh has just gone up to a window and is kind of leaning against it, looking out. "Take me with you," Clarissa thought impulsively, as if he were starting directly upon some great voyage, and then next moment it was as if the 5 acts of a play that had been very exciting and moving were now over, and she had lived a lifetime in them and had run away, had lived with Peter, and now it was over. Now it was time to move, and as a woman gathers her things together, her cloak, her gloves, her opera glasses, and gets up to go out of the theater into the street, she rose from the sofa and went to Peter. I think that part is so wonderfully well written, describing, playing through a potential relationship in your mind through the lens of a 5-act play, knowing that it's going to have an end, and experiencing and seeing that end without having to actually be a part of that relationship. I think that's a great way to describe a thought like that. And then tying it into reality through the image of a playgoer standing up and leaving the theater, and in leaving the theater, breaking free from your imagination, she is leaving her imagination and going over to Peter to console him, and like in the real world. And I just think that's such a perfect way to do imagery, to create something in the character's mind and then parallel an action in the character's mind with a physical action that they're doing. It's just so good. I think that's an incredible way to write, and it's one of my favorite instances of imagery that I've ever read in my life, if I'm being honest. I guess another theme I want to talk about a little bit is just the fullness and happiness with being alive, with being a human. I've gotten a lot of that out of this work. Just how multiple different characters feel so like they just exude a happiness to be alive and a wonder, a rapture for life. And I want to read, there are 2 parts in this book that I really kind of want to touch on that I think exhibit that really well. So this is a part where we're in Clarissa's mind, and she's playing through some interaction she's had with her husband Richard at some point, where he doesn't quite understand her parties and why she enjoys them so much. She goes, "Richard merely thought it foolish of her to like excitement when she knew it was bad for her heart. It was childish, he thought, and both were quite wrong. What she liked was simply life. That's what I do it for," she said, speaking aloud to life. And I just really like that part. It's just so succinct. There's so many instances of that in Mrs. Dalloway where she'll have a 3-word sentence, 4-word sentence, just be very blunt with a lot of her points. She can be very eloquent and have these long, winding sentences, but she can also be blunt, and I think it's wonderful that she's able to do both of those in this book. And this is one of the instances of her being very blunt, just saying what she liked was simply life. That's it. There's not much more. There's not a part about life that Mrs. Dalloway likes more than anything else. It's just life, just the living, the sheer living that she really likes. And there's another part here at the very beginning of the book where she talks about how she's not incredibly educated. She doesn't know a whole lot. She goes, She knew nothing, no language, no history. She scarcely read a book now, except memoirs in bed, and yet to her it was absolutely absorbing. All this, cabs passing, and she would not say of Peter, she would not say of herself, I am this, I am that. And I really like that message of her being like, I'm not going to say I'm something or someone else is something. That's another good point that this sentence makes. But just, that's another sentence, another passage that I think really shows just how enraptured Clarissa is with life, all of life, even though she's not very learned. She doesn't really understand a whole lot about life or many of its intricacies, but just all of it around her, all happening at once, just fills her with so much joy. And I think that's a really impactful and touching message. And then another part of this book that I think also looks upon life with so much fondness is the very end of the book, where everybody's at Clarissa's party, and then Peter Walsh, her kind of childish former partner, and a character, Sally Seton, who is another character from her past, who is a rather wild and free spirit, which is she's a very interesting character for a novel written in 1920. She's very free, very liberal with herself, and she stands out very vividly in this book, and she's a nuisance to a lot of the characters just because of how free she lives, how carefree she is. And there's a part where it's revealed, like she shows up to the party and people learn that she's actually married, and they're like, wow, she was one of the last people I would have ever expected to settle down with somebody. But her and Peter Walsh are both looking on at this party, and they're kind of they're resonating on, I guess, their past, and how a lot of people in this room, their past interlink in this like memory of old, and they're looking on both the people in the party and how they've changed, and also on themselves and how they've changed, because the memory that we touch on, that all of them are kind of related in, happened when they were about 20 or something, to mid-20s or something, and now they're mid-50s, and so they're so much older looking back, so much wiser, and they talk about how they're like, man, you don't really know much until you grow up and you're able to look back. What did they say specifically? Let me find it. I'll just read you the passage that I really like from this part that I think encapsulates that feeling and that wisdom very well. Peter goes, "When one was young," said Peter, "one was too much excited to know people. Now that one was old, 52 to be precise. Sally was 55 in body," she said, "but her heart was like a girl's of 20. Now that one was mature then," said Peter, "one could watch, one could understand, and one did not lose the power of feeling," he said. "No, that is true," said Sally. "She felt more deeply, more passionately every year. It increased," he said, "alas, perhaps, but one should be glad of it. It went on increasing in his experience. There was someone in India. He would like to tell Sally about her. He would like Sally to know her. She was married," he said. "She had 2 small children. They must all come to Manchester," said Sally. "He must promise before they left." I just think that whole passage is so touching, talking about how you feel more and more with every year, that like, for better or for worse, you feel more emotions, and how you're more wise in your emotions now that you're older than when you were younger. And I just think that's a very touching idea, that life gets fonder, the berry gets juicier as you live more life, that your years don't wane, that just because you get older, life doesn't get more bitter. It doesn't, that feeling is what makes you human, that the ability to feel and to experience, that is what is beautiful. And I just think that passage highlights that theme extremely well. And then we have Septimus. Septimus, I talked about him a while ago, but he is also such a good character. He's one of my favorites from this book. The way that Virginia Woolf portrays shell shock and talks about war and how it was all for nothing, that he prided himself on not being able to feel anything, about being a good soldier, and about appeasing his superior Evans, and that he's even like trying to appease him from beyond the grave, and it's all for nothing, that all of that, it didn't fulfill him, and it left him completely numb, not being able to feel anything at all. And then like one of his last moments, it's so touching, I really love it, is when he is making this hat for someone that his wife Regia knows, and he finishes it, and he's so happy with this hat. He's so happy with how he's done. He's very proud of himself. And Regia also looks at the hat, and there's this moment of like premonition where the narrator says like she would always look at that hat and feel fondly and think of him because it was one of the last things he made. And Septimus feels so happy with how he has made this hat. He's just so fulfilled by it. It goes, "It was wonderful. Never had he done anything which made him feel so proud. It was so real. It was so substantial. Mrs. Peters' hat." And I just think that's so touching that, like, war has nothing on him. That as much as he dedicated to war and prided himself on his ability to be a soldier, none of that even compared to the simple act of making a hat. That something as routine as making a hat and just giving it to somebody else, that was more significant to him, and he felt more proud with his action of doing that than he did in everything that he did during the war. And I just think that's a really powerful anti-war message and a really wonderful testament to all the poor soldiers who suffered from shell shock and PTSD from that time period. And then, unfortunately, Septimus does kill himself not too long after that. But Clarissa Dalloway has a really interesting revelation about this suicide that I think is the last thing that I really want to talk about. Is she says that she's glad that he did it. She heard about a soldier dying, and she says she's glad that he did it, which was something that really stuck with me, and I was very confused as to why she said that. It was so weird to me. It goes, she felt somehow very like him, the young man who had killed himself. She felt glad that he had done it, thrown it away. The clock was striking. The leaden circles dissolved in the air. He made her feel the beauty, made her feel the fun. Which I just thought that was such an interesting and thought-provoking way to talk about this theme. Her being glad that this guy killed himself, and that his action of killing himself made her feel better, made her appreciate her little slice of life more. And I just thought that was a really interesting way to talk about this. And at first glance, you almost feel bitter towards Clarissa. You're like, oh my God, you're gonna make light of your own situation out of someone else's suicide. But I don't think that's what's happening. I more so think that, because they talk about this a page earlier, that Clarissa feels like death is seeking some sort of absolute truth. She calls it like getting to the center of it, getting to the center of life. And I think she views Septimus killing himself as him not being able to find his truth in this life, and it's still in a desperate search, tries searching for it so hard that he kills himself to find it. Now, this isn't a pro-suicide message. I'm not making a pro-suicide message. I don't think Virginia Woolf is, but it's almost it's giving people who have suffered with self-harm and suicide their flowers, that they're not pitiful people, they are not failures, they did not lose to life, that they are simply searching for something that they couldn't find in life, that they are desperately searching for something that others are able to find in life, but they have not, and in this desperate searching it has led to them to look for something at the very core of it, the very core of existence, and the only way to get to that very core of existence, according to Clarissa Dalloway, is death. And I think that's her almost making peace and with the idea of death and people who struggle to find the rapture that she finds in life, and while also giving her flowers to Virginia Woolf, giving her flowers to the poor victims of the war and victims of self-harm and suicidal thoughts, because Virginia Woolf herself drowned herself. And I think when thinking about it through that, it frames both Virginia Woolf's suicide and this passage in a whole new light. They feed into each other. I think it's a great show of respect to the people who have fought that mental battle and not labeling them as losers because of it. That they have not lost the battle. That the battle has merely taken them somewhere else. But yeah, that's Mrs. Dalloway. There's so much more to this text that I'm yet to uncover, and that I'm sure you would be able to uncover and that I'm yet to talk about. This is something that I can tell is just going to keep on giving and giving and giving, both in thought after I've read it and on my multiple rereads that I intend to do. I would highly recommend this to literally everybody, writers, readers, livers, people. Like, this is such a wonderful book. Virginia Woolf understands people so well. This is one of my favorite books of all time, and I don't say that lightly. Easy 5-star for me. If you couldn't tell just by the way I talk about it, I feel very passionately about this book, and I'm very excited to dip my feet into more Virginia Woolf. If they're all anything like this, I think I'm going to have a wonderful time. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video or you have read Mrs. Dalloway or had some thoughts about it, please leave them in the comments. I'd love to talk more about this book and its characters and themes with you guys. But I think that's going to be it for me today. Enjoyed, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.